distinguished members of Congress and honored guests, award winners, all of you. We're deeply touched and feel greatly honored to have all of you here with us today for this important occasion. I want to especially mention Congressman Bill Huizenga, Trent Franks, Frank Wolf of the Congressional and of the Congressional Netherlands Caucus, all of you. It's a distinguished, important moment, I think. Ambassador Rudolf Beekhink of the Netherlands as well, we are honored by your presence. It's on the exhibition display cases across the Great Hall. The Library of Congress has put an array of materials in various languages about Anne Frank and her family's collections. I want to say a special word about Dr. Katrina Lentos Sweat, Chair of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. She is a merger of the Lentos family and the Sweat family, and she's a remarkable woman in her own right. And I have to say that all of us concerned about the issues in which this prize is being awarded, this special award, and it bears the name of Anne Frank and this remarkable, wonderful person who had met such a tragic fate, but is remembered as a banner cause for all of this. Tom Lantos was a particularly passionate and determined member, as I know Frank Wolf has been, Christopher Holland, other members of Congress has been being concerned about tolerance, understanding, respect for all manner of beliefs. So we have just a few things. We were fortunate to have here also a few loaned personal terms from the Frank family collection. A monogrammed tablecloth and napkin are from the trousseau of Anne's mother, Edith Frank. These items are on loan courtesy of Dr. Ava Schloss, stepdaughter of Otto Frank. The Anne Frank Center USA has also provided a facsimile of Anne's original diary, which so continues to electrify the world. And the issues which were convened here today, and we're honored to be hosting. We're honored to have all of you, and so I want to pass the microphone to Congressman Bill Huizenga from Michigan. He's here to also welcome you and proceed with this program. But once again, we're especially pleased and honored to celebrate something which in the pageant of humanity and the many tragedies is always will hold a special place in the hearts and minds of all people who are concerned about human dignity, tolerance, and a better understanding, not simply with the mind, but with the heart. And we welcome you all here. This is a very special honor for us, and thank you. And Representative Huizenga, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Dr. Billington, and it's a wonderful, phenomenal organization that you run here, and I can tell you I'm a frequent user of the facilities and the services of getting books. It's a great library of resources for us, and the late fines aren't too bad for the members either. It's just like, sir, get the book in now. But it is a great organization to be a part of, and I'm very pleased to stand before you as co-chair of the Congressional Caucus on the Netherlands. I co-chair that with my friend and colleague Chris Van Holland. We have had a number of adventures as we've been exploring and celebrating the 400-year relationship really that exists between this country, and even before it was a country, and the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Our organization has fought to preserve and enhance the existing relationship, and also to build on it for the future, and the importance of that relationship. And there's been a number of different things over the years, and it was always a little tough on the branding. And we're moving forward with what a lapel pin that I'm wearing, and you'll see a number of others wearing as well, with the Holland on the Hill as the moniker. And we think that's a great way of sort of drawing attention to Dutch contributions to our country and what has been going on. Well, I'm pleased to have been a part of a couple of different things that have advanced those relationships, both here in Washington and as well in my area in West Michigan, where we have a number of Dutch settlements, original Dutch settlements. But one of the most memorable things for me was earlier this year when we had the opportunity to plant the horse chestnut tree sapling at the front of the Capitol. That was the tree that Anne Frank herself wrote about in her diary and really looked on as for inspiration and a way to pass the seasons. Part of that day was very special for me because my 13-year-old daughter, Allie, who's here again with me today, was part of that ribbon cutting and part of that planting celebration. And it's that inspiration, that reminder to me of why we're here, why we are talking about this, trying to make sure that the world just isn't better for us. The world is better for the Allies of the world and for some future grandchildren. I'm in no rush, honey. Take your time. But that's really why we're all here, trying to make sure that the world is a better place. And I'd like to thank the Embassy of the Netherlands business community, the Netherlands American Foundation for their substantial and positive contributions to the U.S.-Dutch relationship and the various opportunities that we've had to be together. I'd also like to congratulate the 2014 Anne Frank Award recipient, Dr. David Saperstein, who we had a chance to meet last evening at the ambassador's residence for dinner, and a special recognition that is going to Dr. Canon Andrew White, who I had a chance to sit next to last evening, and both fascinating men with an amazing perspective of what is going on in the world from some very unique perspectives and perches. And I look forward to hearing from them both as they enlighten us. And with that, thank you all for attending today, and I'd like to introduce my friend and colleague, Chris Van Holland.
Thank you, Bill, and let me start where Bill did, and Dr. Billington, in thanking you and your colleagues here at the Library of Congress. This institution is a national treasure, and we want to thank you for being such a wonderful custodian of that legacy and having grown it. And it's obviously a place where we hope to transmit human knowledge, what we've learned about the past, and I think today is very fitting that we're having this gathering here. It's great to be with my friend and colleague Bill Huizinga as we team up to have a series of events that demonstrate both the depth and the breadth of the relationship between the United States and the Netherlands from the various earliest days. And it's great also to be here with our colleagues Frank Wolf, who is going to be leaving us, and we're going to miss Frank, but he has been a clarion voice when it comes to human rights, which we believe have also been part of the Dutch heritage and now part of the American heritage. And of course, Trent Franks, thank you for being here as well. You're going to be hearing from them. And Katrina Lanto-Sweat, an honorary member, and thank you for all your leadership as well. And to all of you, you know, the idea behind the caucus is to demonstrate that unity between the United States and the Netherlands, both in times of triumph and in times of trial. And one of the things Bill and I teamed up to do recently was in the aftermath of the tragic shootdown of Malaysian Airlines 17 over Ukraine, held a tribute on the floor of the House to all the victims, but especially pointing out that the people of the Netherlands suffered terrible loss, and we wanted to demonstrate, Mr. Ambassador, that solidarity with you. And that is part of the whole idea behind the Anne Frank Memorial as well, to demonstrate the values that Anne Frank held and that we want to make sure that we continue to uphold going forward. And I'm just really pleased that you have chosen Rabbi David Saperstein to hold this honor. This was conducted in secret, David. I didn't really have any idea, but I can say, as somebody who's really had the privilege of knowing David and his good work for a long time, the panel chose well. Chose very well. I can't think of somebody who better represents the ideals of tolerance, interfaith communication, and human rights than David Saperstein. So congratulations. I know you're all going to be hearing more about that later. And to the vicar of St. George's Church in Baghdad, I haven't met you until today, but I do know you by reputation and are grateful to you for all the work you've done to reach out to different faith communities in a part of the world where we sometimes don't see much tolerance. And one of the things that is so important about today and the legacy of Anne Frank was that idea of hope under adversity and always believing in a faith of a better tomorrow, but recognizing that doesn't happen by accident. It happens by the good work of people here on earth. So I want to thank you for your devotion to religious tolerance and the recognition that you're receiving today. And as Bill said, we planted a chestnut tree in memory of Anne Frank, sort of to keep her ideals alive and growing. And I believe these particular awards of recognition are just another way to allow the memory and values to grow through people who have committed their lives to religious tolerance. So it's a real privilege to be part of the Dutch caucus. I want to thank the ambassador and his team. Ambassador Bekink has been really dedicated to this effort and working hard every day. And to Julia Copius and your whole team, thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for keeping us together. And with that, I think I have the privilege of introducing, and I say this as the son of a diplomat, American Foreign Service officer. I've said to you this before. I know a good ambassador when I've seen one. So, Mr. Ambassador, please come forward.
Thank you very, very much, Chris, for this very kind introduction. And also, Bill, thank you for being so active, both co-chairs of the Dutch caucus. Compared to 30 years ago, there was no Dutch caucus. There was only, I think, Guy Vanderjagt, who by himself was the caucus, perhaps, but not nearly as active as the growing caucus nowadays is. I think we have 15, 16 members now. I'm very, very happy about that. Thank you, Dr. Billington, for using this splendid room. The other time I was here, it was with Senator Burr, who explained a bit about this room. It's fascinating, absolutely. If you look closely to all the art here, I'm very happy to see that it's so well preserved, thanks to you. I think last year we didn't have an award. You are the first, David, who is going to get the award, and rightly so. But we did have a lecture on intolerance, confronting intolerance. I must say that since that, given by our Solicitor General Bolha, who is sitting over there, perhaps you should stand. You did very well. And since I'm afraid that in that year that's passed, intolerance has not been combated enough. We can unfortunately have to conclude that. All sorts of things we didn't dream about a year ago, like Ukraine or ISIS, now have risen to, well, not to the betterment of mankind, I would say. I leave it at that. I'm here to, I'm supposed to introduce somebody who is a child of this house and also an honorary member of this house, Dr. Katrina Lentos-Sweat, who's done so much for religious freedom and who has the most audacious plans to continue. So a big hand for Dr. Lentos-Sweat.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ambassador. My duty here today is largely to serve as the Master of Ceremonies, and I will try to stick to that task. But before I have the opportunity to introduce some of the wonderful heroes of human rights and religious freedom who are here with us today to speak, I wanted to just take a brief moment to think about the spirit that imbues this gathering today. The great Hungarian playwright Imre Madacs once wrote that history portrays good and evil in such vast proportions that both appear miraculous. That is one sort of a miracle, the miracle of the vast, the miracle of the unexplained and unimaginable. But the spirit that we are here to acknowledge and remember and honor today is a very different one. It is the small miracle of the human spirit triumphing, persisting, prevailing, and touching us deeply across the generations, across the tragedy of what befell Anne Frank. We remain moved and touched in ways that we cannot fully explain. And I, like anyone in this room, am awestruck and made silent and slack-jawed when I see the vast miracles, those that defy description and explanation. But in my own life, I am moved and changed and inspired by the small miracles. And she is such a small miracle, and one that from the time I was a young girl and first read her books to this day and age, when I serve now as chair of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom and try to carry that banner for tolerance and making space for people of all faith in the public arena of every country, I continue to be inspired by the words and the remarkable small miracle of her life. We are going to hear from a lot of pretty small and miraculous people here today, and I am going to have the great privilege and honor of introducing them. And the first one of these genuine heroes on behalf of religious freedom and tolerance is Congressman Trent Franks, who I've had the chance to get to know a little bit through my service on USCIRF, and who has been a real lion on behalf of these causes and these issues. And we're so honored to have you here today with us, Congressman Franks, and I'd like to invite you to come up and say a few words.
Well, obviously, there's no way in the world I'd even try to live up to that, but I do want to say to you, Katrina, your father would be so very proud of you. You know that you've led this effort and continued in his steps, and I just got a feeling he's in there clapping like the rest of them here. So just it's a sweet honor for me to be here in the members' room. As it happens, the very first time I came to Congress, the first night I arrived, they met here first. And they called upon me to open the freshman class in prayer. So this is a special meaning here to me to be with all of you today. But I got to tell you, today makes it even more special because I'm here among all of you, and especially one that I want to point out to someone I think is a true warrior for religious freedom and human dignity, someone that has just passionately, all through his years in Congress, has stood for the right things and has been fearless, and I just have the greatest possible respect and affection for him, and that's Frank Wolf. I appreciate you, Frank, very, very much, sir. And also, Rabbi Saperstein, I don't know you well, but I know you by reputation, and I just think it's wonderful that you're here, and I look forward to being able to call you ambassador and to work with you. And I know your commitment to the international religious freedom cause is legend, and I'm just honored to be here with you, sir. And I also had the privilege earlier to meet with Reverend Canon Andrew White. What a gentle hero, what a giant. And I just have to say to you, I'll never forget the meeting that we had. And he is over there with the least of these, trying to do everything he can to help and be courageous and strong. And I want you to know it's just my honor to know you, sir, and I hope that your work continues and that somehow all of us can be behind you as much as we can. Who has inflicted this upon us? Who has made us Jews different from all other people? Who has allowed us to suffer so terribly till now? Who knows, it might be even our religion, from which the world and all peoples learn good. And for that reason and that reason only do we have to suffer now. I see the world gradually being turned into wilderness. I hear the ever-approaching thunder, which will destroy us too. I can feel the sufferings of millions. And yet, if I look up into the heavens, I think it will all come right. That this cruelty too will end, and that peace and tranquility will return again. I sometimes wonder when I consider the tragedy and the Holocaust that the Jewish people went through, if sometimes these words, or maybe they didn't know all of them, but this spirit that lived among them wasn't what helped them survive that terrible evil. Because, you know, many peoples would have been crushed by the Holocaust. They would have either been seized with revenge or completely crushed in their spirit. But not this people. They dried their eyes and they looked up again. And they began to build again. And they built their families, they built a community, and they built a nation. And today the Nazis are gone, but the Jewish people and Israel remain. And I am convinced with all of my heart that some of these things that Anne Frank wrote reflect the spirit that caused that one of the greatest stories that humanity has to be told. And I hope they keep telling it. And now, some of you in this room know about the work of the International Religious Freedom Caucus, and they asked me to say a couple things about that. I have the privilege of chairing that. It was founded in 2006, and it's a bipartisan caucus of over 80 members of Congress who've united together to address religious persecution. The IRF caucus focuses on religious freedom within the broader context of human rights, and especially on the right to choose, change, or reject religious belief based on one's own convictions. True tolerance is not pretending we have no differences, ladies and gentlemen. It's being kind and decent to each other in spite of those differences. Commitment to religious freedom is not just for one faith community, but for people of all faiths around the world. Thomas Jefferson further explained that when he said, "The constitutional freedom of religion is the most unalienable and sacred of all human rights." And I believe religious freedom is the cornerstone of all freedom. My own commitment to this fight stems from just the deep belief, like all of you have, that all human beings are children of God and they are created equal, and that this is a principle stemming directly from the founding of our country, and it's enshrined in our Constitution and our Declaration. And as chairman of the Constitution Subcommittee and the IRF caucus, I am prayerfully dedicated to promoting human dignity and the innate worth of every human life in America and across the world. And just say in closing, Americans know from our own history and experience that religious freedom is a critical prerequisite for all people in a functioning society or democracy. It is the manifestation of all other rights operating in concert with one another. And we must continue to work together on these critical issues. And I look forward to working with all of you on behalf of those who across the world are most vulnerable. Again, got to invoke Thomas Jefferson here. He said, "Almighty God created the mind free. All attempts to influence it by temporal punishments are a departure from the plan of the holy author of our religion. All men shall be free to profess and by argument to maintain their opinions in matters of religion." I don't know that it gets more clear than that. So may we all be relentlessly committed to pursue that day when the light of hope will fall across all of the lonely faces of God's children all over the world, and that this most inalienable and sacred right of true religious freedom will be the possession of every last human being, and the destiny of future generations will be to walk in the sunlight of liberty for as long as mankind inhabits the earth. So thank you all. I can't again express what a privilege it is to be with you, and I hope we go forward, and I believe we will. God bless every one of you.
Thank you so much, Congressman Franks. You know, when you talk about the Nazis being gone and the Jewish people still being here, my sister and I, there are only 2 daughters in our family. Both of our parents were Holocaust survivors, but we gave our parents 17 grandchildren, which was quite unusual for professional, highly educated women of our generation to have such large families. And people often said, why? You know, why did you have such big families? And for us, it was our answer to those who wiped out most of our family, those who sought to wipe us off the face of the earth. We wanted to answer that evil with good. We wanted to answer their death with life. And it gives me enormous pride when I see those 17 grandchildren of Tom and Annette Lantos and the lives that they're leading and the answer that they are. So there are ways in which we each in our own lives answer evil with good. And thank you for your wonderful comments. It's next my privilege to introduce Frank Wolf. He is the acknowledged hero, some might even say the father of international religious freedom in the United States Congress. And when he retires, as he is insisting he will do, despite the wishes of so many, at the end of his current term, a void will be left that will be enormously hard to fill. Congressman Wolf, to my great pleasure and joy, is also the co-chair of the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission, and his leadership and his courageous guidance on behalf of the full range of human rights has truly been extraordinary. In my work, sitting opposite my desk at my office is a portrait of my father, who had, as many of you know, very piercing blue eyes and a larger-than-life personality. And I look up at it often during the day to sort of get confirmation, a thumbs up and a thumbs down as to whether or not I'm on the right track with a particular initiative. But there's another person who I mentally think about sometimes when I'm evaluating what I should do, and that is, would Frank Wolf approve of this? Would Frank give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down? And he's just that sort of an iconic figure to those of us engaged in the cause of human rights, and particularly religious freedom. And before I turn the microphone over to him, I would like to encourage each and every one of you to please be sure at the end of this day to go and read the extraordinary speech that he gave today on the issue of rising anti-Semitism globally and in this country. It is comprehensive, it's powerful, it's chilling, it's brilliant, and it is vintage Frank Wolf, and how appropriate that on this day when we honor and remember Anne Frank that you should have given that speech. So it is my great pleasure to introduce the distinguished Congressman Frank Wolf.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Billington. Good to be with you. And I wanted to thank the Dutch Embassy for this award and for granting it. I visited my first trip to the Netherlands. I visited the Anne Frank House back in the mid-'80s. I think I was with Congressman Coates then, who was a member of the House. Rabbi Saperstein, I want to congratulate you. Rabbi Saperstein was there at the founding of the Religious Freedom Commission. There was a gathering. If I remember, Chuck Colson was there, Don Argue was there, Cardinal McCarrick was there. Rabbi Saperstein was there when this thing kind of got started. Rabbi Saperstein was also, as you know, a commissioner on the commission and understands worldwide where these things and what's taking place. And now To the credit of the Obama administration, they have appointed him now to be the ambassador. So he sort of rounds out the entire thing. And there cannot be a better choice than Rabbi Saperstein to serve here. We do see rising anti-Semitism, not only through Europe, in places that you would have thought it wasn't coming back, it now is back. But we are also, unfortunately, seeing it on American college campuses. And there's been a failure of administrators to speak out. There's been a failure, and so we are seeing it, things that we would not think that we would see for many, many years. Canon White. I have followed Canon White. We have met a number of times. We have been on programs. In fact, as I have sent his video out where he speaks about what's taken place and the number of people in his church who have been killed. He lives in a tough neighborhood. He lives in Baghdad. In Iraq, more biblical activity took place in Iraq than any other country of the world other than Israel. Abraham, Nasiriyah. Abraham is from Iraq. Ezekiel was buried in Iraq. Jonah, Nineveh, they just blew up what purported to be Jonah's tomb. Ezekiel was buried there. Daniel was buried in Iraq. And he has stayed in Iraq where he could have left and gone back to England, and there would have been, and obviously his health has not been the very best. And so the fact that you're getting a different award but named after Anne Frank is very, very appropriate. I think we in the West are losing our voice. I think we are losing I think both political parties are losing their voice on this issue. I think we need more people like President Reagan and Senator Scoop Jackson, like Tom Lantos and Henry Hyde. They've all gone. But we are losing our voice. And the world is looking to us, and whenever you travel abroad and see, they wonder where they expect, because they remember the history. They remember the words of Reagan, who said that the words in the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence were a covenant with the entire world, not just with the people in Philadelphia in that hot summer of 1776. And they believed that it was a covenant, yet they do not see us. They do not see us in the West, in either political party, both political parties. We have lost our voice, and we need to regain the voice of the Reagans and the Jacksons and the Lantos and the Hyde. The closing two quotes. William Wilberforce, who was the one who abolished the slave trade, did many other things, but stood up and probably could have been prime minister, but in order to sort of carry out his commitment, said, "You may choose to look the other way, but you can never again say you did not know." We know what is on the television. We see the reports. We know. And lastly, in closing, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who gave his life, who was hung at Flossenburg State Prison with you. They say that you could have heard the artillery of the Allied forces come, made the comment, "Silence in the face of evil is evil itself. Not to speak is to speak, and not to act is act." It's our job and our obligation to not only speak, but to act. Congratulate Rabbi Saperstein and Canon White, and thank you again, the Dutch Embassy.
You can see clearly I'm not exaggerating in saying we're in the presence of many heroes today, and I know you all feel as privileged as I do. Before I introduce the Thomas Circle Singers, I have to acknowledge Dr. Billington, who has welcomed us all here today to his beautiful house and to this extraordinary institution. Those of us who have known Dr. Billington for many years know that he is the spirit of the Library of Congress. He embodies what this place is all about, this love of knowledge, this sense of wanting to impart it and share it and make it the patrimony and the legacy of every single American. This extraordinary institution that you have guided now for so many years, and we couldn't be in a more wonderful place, and thank you so much for welcoming us here. We next are going to have the privilege of hearing from the Thomas Circle Singers. This is music with a mission. They have been both entertaining and delighting and elevating audiences in Washington, D.C. for many years. And we will be hearing a number drawn from the diary of Anne Frank, a very extraordinary and special new choral piece. Thank you so much. Thank you. That was extraordinary. I would next like to introduce Yvonne Simons from the Anne Frank Center, who will tell us about this award and the initiatives associated with it. Wonderful projects like this don't just happen. That's another way where miracles actually have to have some muscle behind those miracles. And so we are so delighted that you're here with us and look forward to hearing your remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Katrina. To honor the legacy of Anne Frank and keep alive the lessons she continued to teach us about tolerance and the importance of defending human rights, in cooperation with the Congressional Dutch Caucus, the Anne Frank Center USA, the Anne Frank House in Amsterdam, and the Royal Netherlands Embassy, we created the Anne Frank Award and Lecture. At a time when nearly 2/3 of the world's population lives in countries with high or very high governmental restrictions on religion, there is no underestimating the need for leaders like Rabbi David Saperstein, the recipient of the first inaugural 2014 Anne Frank Award. Like Anne, whose infallible optimism allowed her to write in July 1944, after 2 years in hiding and only 1 month before she and her family were betrayed, "It's a wonder that I haven't abandoned all my ideals. They seem so absurd and impractical. And yet, when I look up in the sky, I somehow feel that everything will change for the better, that this cruelty too will end, that peace and tranquility will return once more." Rabbi Saperstein embodies hope and dedication. As the director of the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism for 40 years, he has been one of America's leading and most compelling voices towards working towards social justice and religious freedom. There's no doubt that the world is brighter and better because of him. He serves on a board of numerous national organizations, including the NAACP, People for American Way, National Religious Partnerships on the Environment, Bend the Arc, formerly the Jewish Funds for Justice, the Leadership Council on Civil Rights, the New Israel Fund International Council, and the World Bank World Faith Development Dialogue. Rabbi Saperstein also helped incubate the Shoulder to Shoulder campaign, an interfaith response to discrimination against Muslims. In 1999, Rabbi Saperstein was elected as the first chair of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, created by a unanimous vote of Congress. And in 2009, he was appointed by President Obama as a member of the first White House Council on Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships. He also participated in the Religious and Foreign Policy Working Group of the Secretaries of State's Strategic Dialogue with Civil Society and served as a member on the Task Force on Religion and the Making of U.S. Foreign Policy. President Obama has just nominated Rabbi Saperstein to be the Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom. It is my great pleasure to introduce the Ambassador of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, Rudolf Bekink, who will present the 2014 Anne Frank Award to this most inspirational of individuals. The following words, written by Anne Frank in 1944, when she was just 14 years old, reminded me acutely of Canon Andrew White, the 2014 recipient of the Anne Frank Special Recognition Award for promoting religious tolerance and reconciliation. "If God lets me live," she promised, "I'll make my voice heard. I'll go out into the world and work for mankind. I know now that courage and happiness are needed first." I can think of no better description for how Canon White, also known as the Vicar of Baghdad, has lived his life. He personifies reconciliation between religious and political fractions, confronting religious intolerance in what is one of the world's most volatile areas, and certainly one that has seen some of the worst atrocities against Christians in centuries. It is there, in his own words, that he looks after the remaining 6 Iraqi Jews on Friday night, making kiddush and teaching them on the Torah before going back to being the pastor of his own diminishing flock the next day. We should all be so inclusive and brave. In 1998, he was installed as the Director of International Ministry for the Diocese and Cathedral of Coventry, becoming the youngest canon in the Anglican Church. Soon afterwards, he began to head Coventry's International Ministry of Reconciliation and was named the Archbishop of Canterbury's Special Envoy to the Middle East. White helped draft the first Alexandria Declaration of the Religious Leaders of the Holy Land and the Baghdad Religious Accord, both of which were instrumental in bringing together key religious leaders of Christian, Jewish, and Muslim faiths. Lord Carey, former Archbishop of Canterbury, oversaw the establishment of the Foundation for Relief and Reconciliation in the Middle East as a way of supporting Canon White's work in the region. White serves as the president of the foundation. Canon White lives in Baghdad and serves as the vicar of St. George's Church just outside of the Green Zone. He has been dubbed Victor of Baghdad because his church is the only remaining Anglican church in Iraq. His main goal is to work to maintain communications between Shia and Sunni leaders and to gain trust of both key religious leaders on both sides of the conflict. Yeah. It is my great honor at the end to introduce the Ambassador, Rudolph Bicking, who will present the 2014 Anne Frank Special Recognition Award to Canon Andrew White.
I really like this. I can honestly say this is the most moving award I've ever received.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
We like each other.
We're friends.
Yes.
Thank you.
Can I look at it? Yes.
Rabbi Saperstein will now be giving a speech, which will be followed by a moderated conversation. Thank you all.
The year was 1959. I was 11. My older brother Mark, today one of the leading Jewish historians of this generation, was 14. We were in London for the convention of the World Union for Progressive Judaism. On the opening night, our English host singled out a tall, imposing figure and said to us, "That man is Otto Frank, the father of Anne Frank." He was standing very erect, with proud bearing, not unlike the actor who portrayed him in the play and in the movie that had opened just a few months before, and I and all of my friends had seen. And yet he had an almost indefinable quality of a warmth, understanding, and kindness that made him stand out from the people around him. He was exceedingly gracious in sitting down with us and speaking to these two young, awestruck boys and responding to Mark's question for an interview published in our school newspaper. Mark asked Dr. Frank, as a personal witness to one of the great tragedies of modern history, what his message would be to the youth of America. After warning of the persistence of anti-Semitism, he answered, "I have witnessed the power of a criminal dictatorial system and its consequences. The great dangers are mass movements, slogans, materialism, and egotism. I believe in the freedom of the human spirit. America must educate young people with strong characters and courage, who understand the needs of others and true values of life. Personalities of this kind are needed throughout the world, particularly in Europe." Meeting Otto Frank helped us to understand what shaped the radiant spirit of a girl who could produce what is perhaps the most enduring literary legacy of that era. An award bearing the name of Anne Frank would, for anyone, be a great honor. As you can imagine, that childhood encounter with this indelible impact adds to a richness and meaning for me today. Ambassador Beking, my friends from the Royal Embassy of the Netherlands, Katrina, my dear friend, whose father I worked with for so many years, the Anne Frank Center, the Dutch Caucus, to all of you, but especially Ambassador Beking, I am so deeply moved and deeply honored and humbled to be part of this day with a courageous, eloquent, as you will soon hear, and visionary religious leaders such as Canon Andrew White. What he has done in forging interfaith comedy and cooperation at a time of such extraordinary pressures is truly inspiring. And my dear friend, I am honored to share this day with you. My life's work has been in the social justice arena, tikkun olam, as we say in Hebrew, the healing of an often broken world, the task of making whole the shattered hopes and dreams that afflict too many of God's children. Anne Frank's legacy calls across the generations to us today, as do enduring lessons of the Holocaust with their warning of what evil can occur when people of conscience stand idly by when suffering and injustice festers. One lesson of Anne Frank is that her dream will not happen by itself, but only when good people, people like you, people like your friends and families, your kindred spirits across the globe, turn it into a reality using God's wisdom and talents entrusted to us. We were too late for Anne Frank. The time to stop genocides, crimes against humanity, the injustice of humanity against its brothers and sisters. The time to stop it, the time to take effective action to staunch dangers that imperil individual human beings and humanity is before they reach a crisis point. In that context, let me lift up just three of the many urgent challenges that we face that this award bearing Anne Frank's name evokes. First, as anyone who has picked up the diary of a young girl over the years knows, her death was more than a loss of a 15-year-old girl. Her thoughtful memoir serves as evidence that, as with so many victims of the Holocaust, we will never know her full potential. not as a storyteller or an author, or who knows, a scientist, a politician. We don't know what the destiny of Anne Frank or of 1.5 million other children who died in the Holocaust would have been. But we honor their memories with action today on behalf of children, in actions allowing them to fulfill their potential. Across the world, there remain millions of young girls who lack access to primary education. Who knows how many Anne Franks are amongst them if we could only let them flourish. Worldwide, almost 2/3 of illiterate adults are women. In sub-Saharan Africa, only 23% of poor girls in rural areas have completed their primary education in 2011. These dismal statistics are at odds with their impact. The yields from investing in girls' education are substantial. An educated girl is likely to increase her personal earning potential throughout her life and in doing so reduce the poverty of her community. The effects carry from one generation to the next. Educated girls have fewer, healthier, and better educated children. Fewer if they choose to have so, Katrina, but it is their choice. This past April, the extremist Muslim group Boko Haram kidnapped more than 250, mostly Christian teenage girls from their high school dormitory. So too, Malala Yousafzai was shot by extremists in Pakistan. Why? Simply for championing the right of girls to education. These attacks are part of a global backlash against girls' education by extremists. Why are fanatics so afraid of girls' education? As Nick Kristof put it, because there's no force more powerful to transform a society. The greatest threat to extremism isn't drones firing missiles, but girls reading books. And what better way to honor Anne Frank's legacy than investing worldwide in education for girls as a powerful tool for transforming their lives and the communities and societies of which they are part. Second is the need to staunch a direct threat to humanity. The proliferation of nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons to growing numbers of nations and even non-state actors. As Samuel Pizar, the eloquent Holocaust survivor, said in his extraordinary speech before the Israeli Knesset at the second gathering of Holocaust survivors, to us, the Holocaust is not only an indelible memory of horror, it is a permanent warning in the shadow of permanently flaming gas chambers, where Eichmann's reality eclipsed Dante's vision of hell. We have witnessed the pilot project of the destruction of humanity, the death rattle of the entire species on the eve of the thermonuclear proliferation, the final solution. Here, with the authority of the numbers engraved on our arms, he continued, we cry out the commandments of 6 million innocent souls, 1.5 million children of whom I almost was one, never again. From where, if not from us, will come the warning that a new combination of technology and brutality can transform the planet into a crematorium. Finally, one cannot consider Anne Frank's message of the lessons of the Holocaust without considering the growing challenges to religious freedom and tolerance across the globe today. Like Anne Frank, I, as a Jew, know all too well that over the centuries, the Jewish people have been a quintessential victim of religious persecution, ethnic cleansing, demonization. We have learned all too painfully the terrible costs to the universal rights, security, and well-being of religious communities like those Canon White leads when good people remain silent in the face of religious oppression. For me, this is just one key reason why we cannot remain silent today when we see historic Christian, Yazidi, other communities in Iraq and Syria being devastated, when we see Baha'is in Iran, Tibetan Buddhists in China, Shia Muslims in Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Pakistan, Rohingya Muslims in Burma, all victims of governmental or societal discrimination, harassment, persecution, physical attacks. In that context, Ambassador, I thank the government of the Netherlands for what it has been doing to support and aid historic minorities in Iraq and the Near East. And I want to acknowledge the extraordinary work for equality, tolerance, and understanding of the Anne Frank House and of its supporters here in the United States. But even in Western Europe, we are witnessing growing anti-Muslim rhetoric and hate crimes, and an alarming resurgence of anti-Semitic discourse and violence against Jewish communities. Think about it. we saw over this summer the first mob attacks on synagogues since the 1930s. Shootings at schools, firebombs, attacks on Jews in the streets, rhetoric from the resurgent right wing and from immigrant communities denouncing Jews, some calling openly for the extermination of all Jews, messages we thought we would never hear again. And the time to act is now, not when it gets worse. If the lessons of Anne Frank are to flourish, government, civil society, religious leaders must be more assertive, more vigilant, more effective in marginalizing and delegitimizing hate rhetoric and acts of hate. We celebrate this event today here in America's Library of Congress, built on the foundation of Thomas Jefferson's collection, a setting resonant with the understanding that religious freedom was essential to America's success. We began our magnificent Bill of Rights with a commitment to religious freedom, knowing that without it, all other freedoms were imperiled, and so too today. My friends, to the religiously oppressed in every land who live in fear, afraid to speak of what they believe in, who worship in underground churches, mosques, and temples, lest authorities discover and punish their devotion to an authority beyond the state, who languish in prisons, bodies broken, spirits too often disfigured, simply because they love God in their own way or question the existence of God, who feel so desperate that they flee their homes to avoid being killed and persecuted because of their faith. For all of them, Anne Frank's legacy calls us to be beacons of hope and light. These are just some of the urgent challenges we face. As Dr. King said in his remarkable Riverside Church speech, we are now faced with the fact, my friends, that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. Procrastination is still the thief of time. Life often leaves us standing bare, naked, and dejected with a lost opportunity. Over the bleached bones and jumbled residues of numerous civilizations are written the most pathetic words, "too late." Well, Anne Frank's legacy calls us, we must not be too late. Allow me to conclude with a personal story. In 1939, my father, a beloved congregational rabbi, traveled throughout Palestine and Central Europe on the eve of the Second World War. He was one of the last to see the glories of European Jewry in full bloom before the nightmare of Nazism enveloped and destroyed it. Among the places he visited, he went to Danzig, now known as Gdansk, just days after the Nazis had been elected in the May elections. He went with enthusiasm to see the famous, magnificent, beautiful main synagogue of this vibrant community, and to his utter dismay, it lay in ruins. Only the portal over what had been the beautiful entrance front doors was still intact. On the front lawn, there was prominently displayed a sign that had been erected during the election campaign by the Nazis, which said, "Komm, lieber Mai, come, dear month of May, and free us from the Jews." With tears welling up in his eyes and a chilling sense of the impending disaster symbolized by this scene, his glance gazed upward, and then he saw the words, the ancient vision of Malachi, still inscribed over the remaining doorway. Halo avachad lechalanu, halo el echad bera'anu. Have we not all one Father? Has not one God created us? Two visions, one of hatred and tyranny, the other of brotherhood and sisterhood, of unity and peace, one of oppression, the other of freedom, one of darkness and despair, the other of light and hope. This is the choice we face today with a sense of greater urgency. In the words of Abi Eban, the great Israeli statesman, as we look out on the human condition, our consciences cannot be clean. If they are clean, then it is because we do not use them enough. It is not inevitable that we march in hostile and separate hosts into the common abyss. There is another possibility of an ordered world, illuminated by reason, governed by law. And if we cannot touch it yet with our hands, let us at least grasp it with our vision. And that, in the end, is a role of all countries and people of conscience in the affairs of the world and their own nations, to remind the world that it is not yet too late. For despite our failures, if we can find the strength to be like Noah, righteous people in our generation, if through the work of social justice we can still be stirred to strive for something higher and nobler than ourselves, if in saving the life of even a single child, we can feel the self-transcendence that brings chills to the body and tears to the eyes, if we can still be impelled by the prophet's thunderous oration or by the gentle diary of a young girl to stand up for justice, denounce inhumanity, to be bearers of flames of justice, weavers of dreams of freedom for all humankind, then Anne Frank's message will live in our time, and just perhaps, because of the work of our hands, our children and theirs will enjoy the world that she dreamed of, but could never know. Let that be the lesson of this gathering, of this award, for many years to come. Go forward with courage, for her agenda is a greater agenda that can transcend challenges and smash limitations, knowing that we are not the prisoners of a bitter and unremitting past. We can be, we must be, we will be the shapers of a better and more hopeful future. Again, thank you for this award.
I think it's probably quite evident to all of you why we are all so incredibly thrilled and grateful with Rabbi Saperstein's nomination to be the next ambassador at large for religious freedom. I know you're as overwhelmed and inspired as I am by his extraordinarily powerful words. Thank you so much. We are invited, the three of us, to have a guided conversation on a topic of great importance, and that is personal responsibility in confronting intolerance. And I want to begin, Canon White, by asking you a very basic and very real question. Because you, like Raoul Wallenberg, the man who was responsible for saving both of my parents in the hell that was wartime Budapest during the Holocaust, the Hungarian Holocaust, have been willing to interpose yourself, to put your own body there between danger and the innocent victims, and to place yourself in the heart of that danger. How do you overcome your own fear? Because I think it's fear that often holds people back from stepping forward, from answering the call to action.
Do you want to know?
I do. We all do.
It's the children. I love the children. I call them my children. And people say, how do you cope with the fear? In the Bible it says, perfect love casts out all fear. And the love that I have received is from my children. That is the sole reason. In my room in Baghdad, it's a very simple little room. My door is always open, and it's always full of children. The children are there all the time. The last thing I do before I go back to Baghdad every time is to go into the toy shop and the sweet shop and buy things for the children. Isn't it, Sarah? We love them. And Anne Frank is one of those inspirational young people who drives us forward. Why I'm there, why I love it, is because of people like Anne Frank.
That's very powerful. And of course, to me as a mother of many children, thank you for bringing it to that very real point. Rabbi Saperstein, could you talk a little bit about what it is that you think distinguishes those who are bystanders to evil, bystanders to intolerance and prejudice, and those who are, I've heard the phrase used, upstanders. What is it that makes some people, very ordinary people, ready to be upstanders?
Such a difficult question to know what moves people to do things that in good conscience they know they should do when there are barriers inside or outside that threaten them. I mean, psychologists spend a lot of time trying to figure this out. Think about it, people who have addictions and can't shake the addictions, people engage in dangerous activity when they know they shouldn't, they understand the risk to them on a rational basis, and yet they end up doing it over and over and over again. And those people who stand by when they have the opportunity to do something good and don't do it. All I can say is that in every situation, it starts with those who are willing to take the first step. There's a midrash, a commentary on the Torah about the children of Israel coming to the Red Sea. And Moses expecting the Red Sea to part, and it doesn't part. And they become more and more fearful. The army of Pharaoh is coming behind them. It's closing on them. The sea is in front of them. What are they to do? And finally, one person steps in and walks up to his neck. And at that moment, the sea parts and they go through to safety. What I do know is that throughout history, during the Holocaust, during the hardest times, during the struggles for freedom across the globe, it has required courageous individuals to begin publicly or sometimes quietly and mobilizing others to act like them. When one person takes a step, others will follow. And when no one acts and everyone waits for someone else, that's when paralysis ends up giving the oppressors their victory. So it starts in hopefully everyone at the right time in their own lives finds that moment where they will have the courage to step forward.
Canon White, you spoke about perfect love, casting out fear. And obviously you are quite an embodiment of Christ-like love in your life and in your ministry. But I'd like to ask both of you to talk about, in a way, some of the more self-interested reasons that each of us might have for standing up to evil. One of the things that I think has always been very powerful for me is the prayer of Pastor Niemöller, where he talks about, first they came for the Jews, and they came for the trade unionists, and they came for the Catholics, and in each instance he says, I was not a Jew, so I said nothing. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. I think we can look at history and understand that evil ignored, evil permitted to grow and to gain in strength will find our door. It will not pass us by. We will not escape unscathed. And so how do you think we can also make more effectively the case to the world, whether it's to political leaders, whether it's to ordinary men and women, whether it's to civil society, that you cannot turn away from evil. It will find you. You cannot build a little moat of security around yourself. How do we make that case?
What is really difficult is when, like, I have dedicated my life to working for tolerance, for religious tolerance, for breaking down division and evil, and then the evil still comes. My people are being slaughtered, massacred, persecuted, and I have done everything to try and prevent it. And I think the message for all of us is that even when they get us, we mustn't stop. Even when they destroy us, we must not destroy them. Even when there is no love shown to us, we have still got to show love. We must never stop. We must never give in. I will go back to my people and see so many of them who have been killed, destroyed. They are left there, laying on the streets. If I just turned round in hostility against those who have showed us hostility, it would simply create war. But we have to work for peace, and it hurts. It's not easy. We must continue it. And that is only when we're really doing it, when everything is against us, we continue.
May I just ask you, as a result of your work, who in Baghdad society has been changed by it, and has come to help? What kind of response do you get from beyond your own community, from civil society, from other religious leaders, from political leaders?
Well, it's very interesting that we have got, our community does not just serve Christians. I have a clinic and 150 patients a day go to the clinic, and at least 97% are Muslims. And those Muslims, I love them. They love me. We work together in reconciliation. We sit down, we meet together, we eat together, and we say that we will never start hating each other. We will always stay together. These people have been changed. They weren't always like this. They changed when they were loved, when they were welcomed. Some of them were like that, but not all.
Just another thought. In the Jewish tradition, in the time of the Talmud, the time that Jesus lived, there is a concept that developed called Mipnei Darchei Shalom, which says, for the sake of the ways of peace, is what it means. And what it says is that where Jews and non-Jews live together, they collect charity together, they distribute charity together, and they give equally to Jew and non-Jew alike, Mipnei Darchei Shalom. And I think it was like the first insight anywhere in the world to creating a system of kind of community relations, a recognition we're all in it together. For Jews throughout history, we were never safe, we were never secure if others could be victims of persecution and discrimination. We flourished in societies like America that had no room for religious persecution and discrimination. So, you know, that's been a lesson for us throughout history. And yet, when I think about all the extraordinary things most Jews that I have seen and been proud of, most Christians I have seen and been proud of, most Muslims, most human beings, over and over again, they're not rationally thinking it through. Well, this might be good for me or mine. They're basically doing it because it is the right thing to do. And that powerful impulse that exists in all of us, when we can nurture it and allow it to flourish, that is really the hope of the future of humanity.
We would like to invite this wonderful audience to join in this conversation. Are there any questions or comments that somebody would like to offer? No?
That's good, because I have 100 questions for the panel.
We do have a question over here, yes.
Thank you very much. It is truly touching, and also seeing that it's so important to leave the legacy of Anne Frank. And I like to, Katrina has been involved and supportive. I would say one of the worst atrocity that's still happening in today's world is the harvesting of organs from people who practice truth, compassion, tolerance. And this is at a very great scale. I just returned from the World Transplant Congress with first-hand information from doctors who
who are involved in that. And so I like the panelists to talk about what we can do to really, regardless where the people are, but we, as humanity, we need to stop this atrocity.
Thank you. Any thoughts on this obviously very chilling human rights abuse of the harvesting of organs?
If I understood the question.
In some instances, live
it happens with people in prison. It happens with people in China.
Primarily in China.
I understand the dilemma. The fundamental principle of the autonomy of human beings to make determinations in accordance with their conscience of what to do seems to me to be a core principle. This is as key a violation of that principle as I can imagine. This idea of conscience, the fundamental rights of conscience, fundamental autonomy of people. I suspect we might interpret that and apply it differently in some cases where some of the underlying axioms and postulates are different on some of the social issues here in our country, and people in good conscience can differ on how to apply it, but I think we all agree on that core principle of autonomy, the right of conscience of people to determine their destiny, and this is as clear a violation as you can think of.
And of course, this notion that human rights are indivisible, that we cannot turn our gaze in one direction and say this community is suffering, but somehow be blind and indifferent to a truly appalling abuse, perhaps because it takes place in a powerful country, a country that we want to build relations with or have commerce with. I hope we never become a society in which we know the cost of everything and the value of nothing. And so I think when we're talking about human rights issues in China, that is a persistent problem, an unwillingness to speak boldly. I'm sorry, Canon White, you were going to respond.
This incredibly awful harvesting of organs is, of course, something we must all stand against. But at the same time, we've got to acknowledge the failure of so much of the Western world to take seriously the issue of organ transplants. We need to be able to encourage other people to donate their organs. I'm speaking as somebody who's not just a priest, but a medic. I'm really a gas man. I can put you to sleep with drugs or a sermon. And one of the things which really disturbs me are the lack of organs which are offered in the West. And the fact that people are driven to go to other places to basically buy organs is inhumane.
And, I would say there's a member of our family, my beautiful niece Charity, some
Yeah.
of you know her, who was the beneficiary twice of a double lung transplant. But, it is the moral gulf between a gift of life freely given, as you say, through the exercise of your dignity and autonomy, and saying, this is a gift of life I give to those who need it, contrasted with the horror of victims being killed for a commercial purpose to harvest their organs in a commercial trade. It's, it's the difference between heaven and hell, a vast gulf between them. Do we have, yes?
Last evening, Rabbi, we had a very interesting conversation at the dinner table about what it is that keeps communities from opening their minds to all of the information that's in the world these days. And I would be very curious, I didn't get to hear your full answer to that. We had a very dominant partner at our table who dominated the discussion, but I'm very curious. No, it wasn't you.
I wasn't there either, so it couldn't be me. Usually that's an accusation my husband makes against me. So.
But what I would like to know from both the rabbi and the vicar is, what is it about today's world that drives these communities into such narrow extremism when there is such a plethora of access to information about all of us that might otherwise educate them of the diversity and the benefits that might be realized if we all got along.
Max Weber, in a famous set of lectures before the German Bundestag, or whatever it was called right after World War I, gave a series of lectures about the difference between an ethical politician and an ultimate politician. An ultimate politician being so imbued with a particular view that controlled their destiny that they were willing to do anything in order to achieve the goal they had, and an ethical politician having a set of ethics that judged what actions there were. I think there's sometimes that people believe so deeply in whatever it is that they believe that they shut themselves off to anything that would counter it. I think that in American society, I don't know what it's like in Europe, although I suspect in a lot of countries that have party newspapers or newspapers that back one party or another, it may be the same problem here. But we have an echo chamber in which increasingly, with the fragmentation of news and information, people are listening only to the things that verify what they start with, the assumptions that they start with. And they close themselves off. And because it's coming from to other views, and because it's coming from a reputable news thing, it just affirms it and reinforces it, and therefore drives the divides between people at a time we need commonality and consensus and compromise between people more than ever. You feel it in Congress, you feel it in our society, you feel it in the news media. Here it is a very dangerous trend. Look, there are 2,000, according to the sociologists, denominations and faith groups and sects in the United States. Other than the only one that would compete is India. Other than that, far and away the most diverse religious groupings in the history of the world. 2,000 of them. The last thing we need are things that create sectarian divides to tear this country apart. We've been spared what so much of the other world, has confronted here. And part of that is we've been open to each other. We have interfaith cooperation and dialogues, and we're working together all the time, going across broad theological differences and political difference. Think of the International Religious Freedom Act. And so much of the work we've done for religious freedom, it brings us together. It helps us understand each other. It helps us respectfully differ where we differ. We've lost so much of that in today's society, and I think all of us have an obligation to do everything we can to bring it back.
I think there are two things which really cause such division and even terrorism are the concept of fear and loss. Fear and loss. Loss because when people feel they have lost something, they think they have to show that they have still got what they have lost. Look at the crisis in Iraq with these awful extremists. They came about because they felt that the government of Iraq was sidelining the Sunni minority. And to a certain extent they were. And so they felt that they were losing. They once had power, they no longer had power. They once had money, they no longer had money. They once knew their future, they no longer knew their future. And so they say, right, we will take it under our own control. We will show we have power. How do we show we have power? We will physically demonstrate that we can massacre, persecute, diminish, and remove the other.
That's very, very profound. And, another thought that occurs to me is the need for humility. When we have too much certitude, even about the things we hold most dear, it becomes a wall. It becomes a cause of divide. It becomes a cause of pride. Somebody once said, when I ponder the question where I stand in relation to God, I am reminded I do not stand at all. I kneel. But I think we need more of a spirit of humility in the way we approach the other and the way we approach those with different visions of God, different visions of truth, and that perhaps is also part of the answer. I think you, like me, wish this conversation could go on much, much longer. I believe Rabbi Saperstein may have a plane that he needs to catch, and we are going to be blessed with one more very powerful musical number from the Thomas Circle Singers. So I would like to bring this part of our program to an end with thanks to our two extraordinarily inspirational honorees today. It will be hard for the Anne Frank Awards to live up to this incredible beginning.
It's really
fantastic. Thank you. And now, please, the Thomas Circle Singers.
Sweat. Thank you, Yvonne. Thank you all for being here. Thank you also to my colleagues and friends at the embassy who made it possible. Thanks to the caucus. And now there's some refreshments, I think, downstairs in the Whittle room. So you're all invited to come to join us there. Thank you.
Thank you.